Hello again everyone, how are you doing? Hope you're keeping alright. It's been a long time, sorry about that, but it is time finally for us to take a look at 2 more White Dwarfs. So let's do this. Let's do, where are we? July, right? July, and July's White Dwarfs. Hope you had a nice June. I think I did. Seems like it's both been a really long time and no time at all, and loads of things have happened and life is mental and chaotic as it always is, but never mind, we shall escape back in time to July 1984 and July 1994. So time warpy swooshy whirly thing, let's go. Okay, let's do it. Let's have a look at the 80s White Dwarf first. No folder this time. These are loose magazines. I do keep them in a folder, but it's a folder that I've made myself and I haven't yet got around to putting the little strips that will keep these in place. So this one is loose. Let's have a look at the cover. There you go. A definitely sci-fi cover. Somebody will know who it is. That image will mean a lot to somebody. So let's have a look. The cover is, oh, it's a Les Edwards cover. There you go, it's a Les Edwards of Hero Quest and many other gory horror movie images fame. There we go, Les Edwards cover. Would not have figured, so I'm glad I looked. Last time, as I was flicking through here, we were taking a look at some of these little independent game shops. And a couple of people had shout outs and said that they remembered those places, so if you missed that bit, go back and check out the last video. I'm sure the advertising has not changed greatly in a month, so go and check out those places and see if you remember any of those game shops. I'll just flick through here. Look, here's a nice advert for Dragon Meat 84. I've been to Dragon Meat the last few years that it's been running. Is it the same Dragon Meat? Does anyone know whether it's a legacy thing and it's just carried on continuous throughout, or has somebody else taken it on and changed the name? Don't know. This one was in Westminster, and now it's at the what's the name of it? A hotel in Hammersmith. I can't remember the name of the hotel. Anyway, right. So we got White Dwarf. Some more getting to know you role-playing games here. This time, superhero role-playing games. Never been a thing that I'm particularly keen on, but you might see. I definitely saw. Oh, there you go. There you go. This is the issue that Golden Heroes is released, and Golden Heroes. I don't think. Yes, here it is. Ta-da! So there you go. Is that a coincidence that Games Workshop are just releasing Golden Heroes and they do an introduction to role-playing games about superheroes? Don't know. This one, it says that it was originally available by mail order and is being reissued by Games Workshop this month. So that's interesting. Who was it who was issuing Golden Heroes before Games Workshop? Anyway, I don't know. A lot of these I've not heard of. Faster Than a Speeding Bullet, Champions, Superworld, Villains and Vigilantes. Yeah, just not my thing, not something that I'm interested in. Spy RPGs, again, not really something that I'm interested in, but I know Chris, who I play with, has been quite an avid collector of the James Bond RPG. So maybe we'll end up playing that at some point, I don't know. And then sort of some alternative fantasies, like kind of pulpy fantasy games. So Call of Cthulhu, Daredevils, Mercenaries I've not heard of. After the Holocaust I've not heard of. Car Wars makes it in here. It's interesting. I thought Car Wars was a... Oh yes, here we go. It does say, well, it's not a full RPG. It has an enjoyable system which allows limited character generation. It's a bit much calling it an RPG, I think. Gamma World, obviously heard of. Aftermath. And then alternative history things like Bushido, On Guard, Boot Hill. Those I have heard of. along with some tips for how to get involved in gaming if you are not already involved in gaming. Right, enough of that. Let's plough on. SPIDERBITE, a scenario for basic D&D and 8D&D for first and second level characters. This is a fun one. During lockdown, I was running the Hanging Gardens of Barb Elon from a later White Dwarf, possibly an earlier White Dwarf. Another edition of White Dwarf anyway, that has terribly non-PC pygmies as player characters. Make of that what you will. Our pygmies had broad West Country accents, and so we were trying to make them as differently racist, I guess, as we possibly could. And so this was up on my list of things to run after the scenario that I ran after that, carrying on with the same characters, but we never got quite this far. Basically, your explorers have found or been led to a big stone head in the jungle, which contains some interesting and nasty creatures. Excellent, lovely things. Some more reviews of some books. Apparently Phineas Fingers is back. Excellent. This is an interesting article. This is a Steve Jackson, the American Steve Jackson article about punks in 2034. Well, we're only 12 years away from that. He's quite maybe he's had bad experiences with some punks, or actually, because this is the US Steve Jackson, maybe he's talking about American punks. This is very much the kind of Mad Max Dark Future punk gangs on bikes with chains and mohawks and safety pins and giving a hard time to grannies and all the rest of it. Not at all my experience of hanging with UK punks, who are generally, yeah, okay, they have safety pins and mohawks, but they're lovely, lovely people, and would rather make a cup of tea for someone's granny than slap them around a bit. So this is definitely your violent, cliched street punk type character, as devised by somebody who's very much on side with the system. But there you go. If you needed punks described to you and ways to use them in games, there they are. Punk hasn't really gone away in the last 20-25 years. I don't imagine that punks are going to be significantly different in another 12 years time. Here's an article looking at animal cults in D&D. This reads very obviously as somebody who is a bit of or considers themselves to be a bit learned in the ways of the way that sort of shamanic practices view animals, but then hasn't really put that much thought into how to apply it in D&D. It's fairly obvious, I'm gonna say. It lays out a few, a few characteristics that belonging to an animal cult might give you based on the aspects of that animal, and some requirements that you would have to meet in order to join the cult, to be initiated, and possible initiation rites. But I don't think there's very much in there that you wouldn't be able to think about using your own intelligence. We're going to skip obviously past Cast of the Lost Souls, because I'm still going to do that at a later point. Watch this spot. Some fun letters as always. I'm disturbed about the reduction in the number of articles on Traveller. I think you might be the only person there. I've not ever GM'd RuneQuest, and I think that your advice for GMing and running games is ludicrous. Snap out of it. Your magazine is well in middle age and showing signs of failing health. Yep, okay, good. Having bought White Dwarf since issue 9, I welcome any innovations. It's certainly improved in content, but I feel I must put pen to paper over the latest RuneQuest editions. Recently, many editions have seen the light of day in your RuneQuest column, and I'm not complaining about the quality of these articles. They're colourful and welcome, but they are repetitive. They keep repeating themselves over and over again. Yeah, people moaning. People have always moaned about White Dwarf. Some of it's legitimate, I guess. 3 tasks of Thread. Again, another part, this time under the control of the magician Tom E. Cooper. Thread has gone to a city to steal the fabled Eye of Set from the Temple of Set, and ends up, after escaping traps and running through boulders and grabbing the mighty gem, realises that he made a bit of a blunder. Here are some more colour photographs. Look, colour photographs of miniatures in White Dwarf. This very lovely Ralph the Cloud Giant. Classic Citadel figures here. Some Essex stuff in here. Another Citadel mage here on his throne with his dwarfs. I think they point out that this is the earlier version of this figure, and that the throne was re-released with another figure. There's a fairly common sense article here about making banners by drawing them on paper, colouring them in, cutting them out and folding them around a flagpole. Thanks guys, not really sure we needed to be told how to do that. But interestingly up here, Rick Priestley of Citadel Miniatures informs us that they can supply small accessories. He's talking about candlesticks, plates, cutlery, lanterns, that kind of thing for decorating your dungeons. Send a stamped addressed envelope to Rick at Citadel and he'd be pleased to assist your quest for dungeon perfection. Well, what was it that Citadel were offering at that time that fitted that that little criteria? If you emailed, or not emailed, email was definitely not a thing. If you stamped addressed envelope to Rick Priestley, then what would you receive in return? Some of the best trolls ever released. Don't question me on that, and only £1.50 each. That's obviously still the retail going price for those. Some weirdo beastmen like the camel beastman, and this one that I keep thinking is a slug, but he's not a slug, he's got legs, I'm just not sure what he is. And the hairy guy. Before beastmen were basically Baphomet style ram-headed men. If you remember back to last episode, I know it was a really long time ago, but we looked very briefly at some invisible creatures, a couple of races of invisible creatures. Well, these apparently are the gods of them, who are patently not invisible themselves. You've got fairly typical pantheon of deities here, as you would expect. Not a lot of innovation there. It makes out like I'm saying like these are all really bland ideas in this issue. Yeah, maybe they are, maybe they aren't, I don't know. When you didn't have access to quite the body of reference material and the internet and everything else, maybe you needed a few more basic things spelling out to you. Maybe this is just aimed at a much younger audience, but it feels like they've got quite a lot of articles from people who are very keen to show off their knowledge and their expertise and how good a DM or other they are, without really providing any genuine content that's new and exciting and usable. This, however, this is quite fun. This is about again, it's not that new. It's about taking a monster that's had a particular story arc develop around it in one of your games and build that in as a nemesis for the players who keeps cropping up again. But it gives you some ideas for how to bring that character back in, and how to make them sort of increasingly worthy of the hero's attention, rather than just it being the same orc that keeps following them around, giving them a bit of progression to follow with the characters. So that's an interesting article. Here's a really weirdo thing. This is basically this is looking at folded realities in Traveller. So I guess, I've never played Traveller, but I guess if you have a map in Traveller and your sections are joining each other on 4 sides, is that how it works? If you play Traveller, tell me. But in this case, this isn't like if you go off one side of the board, you scroll and you come back on the other side of the board. So you've got folded realities and varying planes and dimensions. It talks quite a lot about how these spaces might be arranged, and not that much about what they might contain, what the differences might be between them, whether you'd see what the differences are that you would see. But it does come up with if they manage to jump into another plane of existence, another reality, then there could be a split and it could create 2 copies of the crew, and that could, there might be a bit of a character arc you could build around there about sort of, do their personalities divide, or do they become clones, or do they become opposites of each other, and then do they have to track down the other crew and wipe out its reality, or do they have to swap them back into the realities that they should be in? So there are some quite fun sci-fi narrative arcs, but it's a weird thing to devote a whole page to laying out different ways that you could arrange your maps so that they have a limited extent. And then we're back into adverts again. There we are. That's the end of the 80s magazine. Let's go to the full colour glossy 90s magazine. Am I going to be as critical of the 90s magazine? Of course I am, I would imagine. Blood Bowly things. Oh, we didn't even look at the cover. Let's look at the cover. Some space orcs. Does that give you some indication as to what's going to be in here? Oh yes, of course it does, because this is a magazine whose artwork is done specifically for the magazine by in-house artists, in this case Mark Gibbons, whereas this is a cover that they've licensed off an artist that has absolutely no bearing to anything in here, unless maybe to the Traveller article with alternative universes, possibly. Yeah, very little bearing, but they were working with a smaller budget and what they had to hand, which we're all doing, so I know how that feels. Yeah, here we are. Orc Field Artillery, the interesting splatter cannon and shock attack gun in this one. The shock attack gun, particularly interesting, creates a warp field, or a passage through the warp that lets you fire snotlings into the inside of Terminator armour with hilarious results. Yes, sadly that's largely covered from a game mechanic perspective, and we will discuss that a bit later on, I have no doubt. Here's the Derby store opening. Some more Q&A for Space Marine. Slaneshi ships for Man o' War. Some of the weirder looking, this weird sort of propeller slicey thing here for slicing enemies' masts and high level things. It just is the scale of it really that makes it all look a bit strange. Chaos Dwarfs. Quite an interesting discussion on WARSHIPS. Oh, we were mentioning Beastmen earlier, so let's have a look. Here are the goat-headed Beastmen. There you go, falling into a trend of all Beastmen having goat heads. A discussion of how to use war machines, which is interesting tactically. Blood Bowl. Here we go, here we go, here we go. Some how to use orcs effectively in Blood Bowl. From my experience, here's how you use orcs effectively in Blood Bowl. You play orcs, because it's much better to knock other players down all the time. And orcs are quite good at that. Generally you win. I'm sure I'm being really cynical, and there are good reasons to employ these strategies, and there's probably more to the game than rolling a bunch of dice and hoping that you can knock your opponents down quicker, but that's just how the game seems to me. Talisman! Hooray! Love a bit of Talisman, or at least I did as a kid. We played it quite a lot, but as an adult I have to say Talisman as an adult is good for the first half an hour. It's less good for the next 4 hours that it takes you to play the flipping thing, even without any expansions. But it's a fun, nice looking game, and I remember it from being a kid. I remember painting up the figures and being very excited by it. Yeah, less so now. As a game, it's not that great. It could be quicker. And they even say in here that one of the things that they've done to improve this from the previous edition of Talisman is that they've made it quicker. Because in the original version of Talisman, after you have defeated the dragon and claimed the crown of command, you then have to go around the board killing all of the other players. Oh, because we need another 4 hours added onto the game, onto the 6 hours or so that it already takes to play. Yeah, Talisman. Orc bikes. Aha, right, so here we are in the battle report. Here we are in the Warhammer 40,000 battle report with Jervis Johnson and Jake Thornton leading the Ultramarines. I love these comparisons of force sizes. Here, like, here's 2,000 points of Space Marines. Here's 2,000 points of Orcs. It's huge! And that's why everyone wanted to be the Space Smurfs, right? Because you only needed to have 20 figures on the table, cheap as chips. Whenever I had White Dwarf as a kid and I was reading the battle reports, I used mainly to look at the pictures and kind of gloss over the text. It didn't really engross me. I wasn't really that interested, and I think rereading this one, it's because it comes from a very mechanical place. And I get this is a war game, I get this is about strategy, I get this is, you know, two generals trying to put their forces in a place where they can be the most effective to achieve their objectives. I just feel like, especially this kind of 40k battle report, loses all of the narrative, loses all of the storyline, because they're just concerned with placing figures in places. That means that when you roll your bucket full of dice, you have to roll as low a numbers as possible to be successful, which is the essence of the game, but it's never really the way that I've been interested in playing. It's much more fun to play to character, I guess, to sort of semi-role play something, which is why I like smaller skirmishy games. But I do feel like you can do it with big battles. There were some notable fantasy battle reports that we'll come to in a few years' time when I'm still doing this, if I'm still doing this, that covered battles from that kind of narrative perspective. But this isn't one of them. This is a very mechanical battle report, and it leaves me rather cold. But I guess maybe that's because I'm more of a collector and painter than I am a gamer, or just because maybe I'm not a war gamer. But I'm not really a role player either. I like games to have a bit of story to them, and I like to not think too much about min-maxing, getting the most out of my troops. Instead, think about where they are on the battlefield, what choices they would be making on the spur of the moment, and using that as a basis. But I don't know, maybe that's lazy gaming. I just don't see the appeal of spending ages and ages and ages poring over lists trying to make the ultimate list. Life's too short. Go away and paint some nice looking figures instead. I stopped on this page because I saw the classic Space Marine armours. I have always been much more of a fan of some of these earlier armour variants than the kind of quite bland Mark 7. But I noticed that this one actually doesn't have the Thunder armour, the original. It's not the original. It's a post backdated variant, I guess. But in this chronology, the Thunder armour is the original one. It's the one with the kind of bear helmet with a fancy 80s headband, and the guy's got a big power lance. Got one up here actually. There you go. I'm within reach. I am within reach of a marine with thunder armor. There we go, so I could add him. I would love an army of these guys. I think their armor is the coolest Space Marine armor. Maybe I will do that at some point, but not with the original thunder armor models, because obviously they cost a fortune. Now here are those goat-headed beastmen. Here are some ghouls. Here are those weirdly proportioned. Actually, the Chaos Dwarf ones aren't as terrible as the Slaaneshi ones. Are the Slaaneshi ones not even in here? They must be. They must be. I must have skipped a page. There you go. Slaaneshi warships. They wouldn't miss a trick like putting the thing that they're trying to advertise in the magazine in the catalogues at the back. There you go. It's just these big slicey things. They look so weirdly oversized. Like that mast would just fall over. I know maybe I'm being too logical about it, and they can't make them any smaller and make them in metal because they wouldn't cast properly, but it's just like the massive ram on the end of here. Just it looks so weirdly out of scale with the rest of the boat. The Chaos Dwarf ones are alright. Some Blood Bowl things, and then have we got a big scene on the back? Yes, of course we have. This is a lovely scene. Look at this. Beautiful, beautiful studio scenery, and I've seen a couple of people go through things like this house and analyse it. Like, okay, so there's 4 of that skeleton familiar. He's holding a candlestick. They chopped that as the supports there. They've got a roof there. This is an old citadel door on the front here. The knockers are probably scratch built, but we don't know if one has been scratch built and then they've been moulded. We know that Phil Andrews did that a few times on his buildings. He got stuff cast up, he sculpted it once, got it cast up to use over and over again, like window frames and things. Got the little gargoyles sat on the top here. It must be lush just to have access to anything from the catalogue, to just go down to the casting room and like, I need 4 of these, I need a little epic demon to go on top of here, I need this here, and we're just going to turn this into scenery. But also so much of this, like everything other than the miniatures, handmade and nicely finished, although I have issues with the size of these roofing tiles, roofing slates on all Warhammer buildings. They're far too big, but I understand if you're cutting individual bits of cereal box card that they need to be a manageable size, but it's just lovely, and the colours in it really nice. I love this sort of railway flock grass that they had over here before it went all battleboardy and plastic skulls and all the rest of it. It's like a lush terrain with some of the coolest buildings in it. It just looks brilliant, which makes flicking through, okay, this is a sci-fi battle report and I'm not a big sci-fi fan, but even so, flicking through these photos and looking at the jungle and looking at the scenes, that was always what attracted me into the hobby. Give or take the game, I just like looking at the pictures, which is why I like the White Dwarfs from this era, even though they kind of haven't got to that point where there is loads of hobby, like do-it-yourself content in here. It's still a bit like, let's reiterate the rules, but there are, we'll bring out new things. Here's the rules for using them. Here's some new things that are available. This is, the tactics thing here is quite nice, but it was the pictures. It was like, oh, I want to do that. I want to do that. I'm getting close to doing some of it, but it doesn't look like this still. I still go for my own look and then go, oh yeah, but it doesn't look like White Dwarf from the 90s. Anyhow, there we go. There's a rambling, slightly moany, sorry about that, slightly moany July video. Feel free to come back at me in the comments with your own opinions. I don't claim absolute knowledge of ultimate opinion. This is all just personal preference, and I hope that I will see you again for another video before we do August's edition, but you never know. In the meantime, if you would like to have some more videos from me, it's not too late to get involved in the Oakbound Patreon. We're doing a warband, and I've almost finished these sculpts. You won't be able to see them in great detail here, but this is a warband based around the account of the druid's last stand on Anglesey from Tacitus, and these are only going to be available to Patreon backers. They'll be cast up in limited number and sent out with copies of the concept art from Christian Schwager. They will get a print of the concept art and a set of these miniatures cast up in metal in a nice little presentation box. So if you are desperate for more videos of me talking about stuff, I've been trying to do some slightly more in-depth videos on the design process and the army selection and the concept art and the sculpting of these figures. They're going to be done by the end of this month, hopefully, all being well, and then they'll be off to cast, and then we'll have a video on the casting process, and then we'll look at painting and we're looking at playing with them. It's just to give a bit more sort of in-depth insider view to what it's like to be running a small miniatures company. So if that interests you and you want more videos of me not moaning about things, check out the Oakbound Patreon, and it's not too late to get involved with that. There's quite a bit of content for you to catch up with. Otherwise, I shall see you some other time soon for another video. Take care.